Hello, and welcome to the I've Seen Everything Reaction Wrap-Up podcast. Here is where I share my thoughts, reactions, and review for my latest reaction videos. To find these full reaction videos, please search for @SeenEverything over on YouTube, or check the description of this podcast for more information. Also, please remember to rate and comment on this episode, and follow the podcast so you can see when I'm putting out new wrap-ups. And now, on to my latest wrap-up for Queen of the Damned. Well, what do I think watching this again for the first time in years, especially after seeing at least the first two seasons of the series? And again, as you're seeing this come out, season 3 has already begun, titled The Vampire Lestat. So that is, I think, the extra relevance of doing this movie now, is we are seeing some of this ground be retread, in that this movie was a combination of those stories, at least from what I understand. And it really, I think, suffered because of that. Again, if you're going to try to do these things, you need to try to do them right, I think, and you need to give them proper room to breathe. It's not to say we couldn't have had some Akasha in a Vampire Lestat movie, especially hinting toward the end, but I do think the two stories should have been separated. And to be fair, I mean, Aaliyah's Akasha, she did an incredible job for what she was given, but she wasn't given a ton in this movie. As far like, she had 4 scenes, as I count, I think, if you're not counting the statue and, like, you know, Lestat feeding from her in that moment. I think the first time we ever actually see her is the scene in the Admiral's arms when she shows up after Lestat was there. We had the scene where she shows up to take Lestat at the concert, and then the scenes back at the house, and then the final fight scene. So I felt like there was 4 distinct ones. I feel like I'm missing one. Let me know if I missed any. But again, only a handful of scenes with her. She's not on screen all that much. Certainly more toward the end, but wouldn't it have been better to have a whole movie centered around her character? Not to say Lestat wouldn't have played a key role, that other vampires would have played a key role, but instead of having this just told in exposition, to actually see it, to see Akasha during her reign, to see why she was put into the form of a living statue, to see all of this unfold in a more full way that was meaningful. This is the problem you have when you try to jam too much into too small of a space. You kind of delete all of the meaning to everything. Again, that was Armand. However you want to go back and forth about, you know, Armand, about how he's represented in the first Interview with the Vampire movie, or how he's represented in the TV show, how much or little any of these things are accurate to the source material or to what the character should be, any of that. I didn't know that was Armand. I didn't know that was Armand because they never said his name. I just saw it in the credits. He's a relevant character in this universe. That seems pretty stupid that most people probably watch this movie not knowing that's who that was. And I'm not trying to make a big deal about that. I'm just trying to underline it being a good example of detail getting thrown away. We didn't get to know Marius very much. We saw Marius about as many times as we saw Akasha. A little bit more in the beginning when he turned Lestat, but then goes away for a long time, shows back up, modern day, to let him know that Akasha has risen, shows up at the concert, shows up at the final fight. A little bit more than Akasha, but not much. So I just feel like enough care wasn't paid to the story they were telling. I feel like it should have been 2 separate movies. I feel like the script could have been a bit better. I feel like we were bridging 2 different worlds here. I feel like we were bridging the type of vampire story that we saw told in the Interview with the Vampire movie. It was somewhere between that and, like, I kept getting the, I mean, again, this is the early 2000s and this is about the time this was happening. I'm getting the feeling of, like, the early Underworld movies. Like we were trying to take it from more of this kind of niche vampire movie that horror fans and, like, vampire fans and people who like slower kind of historical tales about a fictional character, taking it from an audience who would appreciate that to a broader audience. You know, rockstar Lestat, this more fun kind of flashy script. Again, that kind of attempt toward mass appeal of the broadest audience that they could find. Again, very much approaching the same vibe as like an Underworld movie, which Underworld, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put this in that category, but is like a horror action kind of thing. I'm not even bad-mouthing the Underworld movies. I enjoy the Underworld movies, but I enjoy them for what they are. You're not going to go there looking for the deepest thing in the world. You're going to go there looking for like a superhero thing, basically. People with powers fighting each other. But instead of it being like superheroes, like Superman and Batman and stuff, you're going to be seeing, like, you know, vampires and werewolves, or lichens in the case of Underworld, with certain powers battling, these different factions battling each other. Kind of gothic superhero action movie kind of thing, with some horror elements in there because it's the brutality of vampires and lichens and all that. This had that same kind of feel but with maybe a little more depth. So it just feels like something that is the product of a lot of studio decisions. And it definitely feels like a movie that is not of as high a quality in the storytelling department as the original 94 movie, which has its problems too. I don't even want to badmouth Stuart Townsend's performance as Lestat. Again, I think he lived up to what this movie was, to what they were aiming for. And I think he probably was capable of more than that. Like if they'd given him a deeper movie, a deeper script, better story development, better character development, it's not like I don't think as an actor he could have handled that. I think he could have. I'm reminded so often by what, I've heard actors say, wonderful actors say, that there's only so high you can elevate bad material. Like you can be an amazing actor, but if what you're given isn't very good, there's only so much you can do with that. I would have been interested to see what he could have done with a better script. But I also, again, I question, and maybe I'm completely wrong, I don't know, as much as people at the time loved Tom Cruise's performance as Lestat in the Interview with the Vampire movie. It was the only live-action Lestat we had seen. I don't know if I would have bought him in this role as rockstar Lestat. So I don't think Stuart Townsend was bad casting for that. And Aaliyah did an amazing job. Again, I don't think the writing of her character was terribly good. I think that she did a very good job bringing presence and a gravity and a ferocity to this role. You wanted people to be afraid of Akasha. You wanted people to be afraid that she would just be a plague that could roll over the world. Even to the point that Lestat was concerned about that, and Lestat doesn't care about anybody, or at least in many times in his past comes off as the idea that he doesn't care about anybody. We started to see a bit of a challenge to that in this movie. It would have been nice to see some of that explored in a deeper way too. So I feel like I just making the same criticism over and over again. I don't necessarily feel the cast was the problem. I feel kind of a disjointed vision of what the production people were trying to achieve with this movie was a problem. I feel like the script certainly could have been better, and I would have liked to have seen this cast given a chance to work with a better script to tell this story. Moreover, 2 better scripts to tell 2 stories would have been nice. I feel like it would have been more effective. I feel like they would have been better movies. They would have done better. But I'm not the one putting up the money. So that's how I feel about it. I still enjoy it. Still a great soundtrack. Still a lot of things in here to appreciate, especially if you like this universe. So it's still a movie that I'll enjoy watching. Is it ever going to be at the top of my list? Probably not. But anyway, I've enjoyed watching it here again with you. Please be sure to check out the Interview with the Vampire reactions if you enjoy this universe that are still likely coming out on the Patreon. Thanks for being here with me to watch this today, and I will see you on the next video. Take care. Thanks so much for listening to the I've Seen Everything reaction wrap-up. Again, to find these full reaction videos, please search for @SeenEverything over on YouTube or check the description of this podcast for more information. Also, please remember to rate and comment on this episode and follow the podcast so you can see when I'm putting out new wrap-ups. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll meet you here for the next episode.